All right, so by this point, you've seen the Aztec documentary and answered those questions to go along with it. I just wanted to run you through the Inca. In the top of these slides is the Aztecs, but I'm shooting right to the Inca so that I can kind of give you a synopsis on this really quickly. Hopefully, this will only take about 5 to 10 minutes. The Andes mountain range here, that's kind of like the spine of South America, goes from current day Ecuador into Colombia even, and down through Peru and Chile. When the Inca started to come to power, their capital was Cusco. Now in Peru, it's currently Lima in Peru, but Cusco is where you will find their capital of Machu Picchu. Their kind of temple to the gods up there in the mountains. They're very, very, very similar to the Song and then to the Mongols in the sense that they expanded through conquest and then demanded tribute from the defeated peoples. Here are some pictures. You can still see Machu Picchu today. It's a long, long hike. I'd love to do it sometime. That is definitely on the bucket list to get up there and check that out. The Inca were really, really good at connecting their empire. Again, this terrain up in the mountains was not easy, but they used a lot of government funding and a lot of that tribute money to build roads throughout the Andes Mountains, and some of those were their suspension bridges that are still around today. I don't think you could pay me enough money to walk across one of those today. I don't care if I had, a million pillows underneath and I was strapped to, a suspension wire that was going to hold me up. I wouldn't do it. I'm terrified of heights. They were very similar to the Aztecs in that the emperor was considered to be a god, much like in Japan as well. Those are kind of the only empires that I can really think of, the Romans maybe. But when they defeated someone and took over, the Aztecs, as you saw, just kind of let you do your own thing as long as you paid money, which is kind of similar to what the Ottomans would do later on, and we'll learn about them. They allowed people to keep their own language and own culture. They just charged them a little extra. But the Incans, they required people to then learn the language so they could keep kind of a homogenous population and communicate throughout their empire. They were very, very large bureaucracy, just like the Chinese governments, just like the Ottomans, just like the Mughals. Later on, that we'll learn about, to control all of their empire, they had to have smart people in positions of power, but they also redistributed all of their crops and all of their wealth. So really, it was kind of early socialism. Without knowing that it was socialism. It was just kind of natural to them. The terrace farming aspect, and this is really fascinating to me. I think it's interesting, even though I know nothing about farming, but you saw that the Aztecs, who were in a very tropical climate, very hot, very, difficult to grow out in the open because sometimes they could go through periods of drought. They created kind of those little floating chinampas that would allow the roots to go down into the water and just have a natural type of irrigation there already set up for them. Well, the Inca weren't so lucky because it was dry much of the year. And up in the mountains, as you know, it gets very cold. Okay, so your rocky soil isn't great to start with. Then it gets cold, so the frost happens. So what they did was they built these tiered kind of rows, whereas in other cultures you see it flat on the ground. Well, they had to tier it because the water would run down and it would irrigate everything. Also, they built it on stone. Okay, and they used specific types of stone in these situations that held heat longer. So even though the frost might be outside and it might be getting cold, the stone would hold on to that heat, and they were porous, so it would trap the water in there to then, again, allow the seeds to grow. It's kind of fascinating how they found that out. This isn't terribly important, but you do need to know a little of the llamas and the alpacas are part of Incan culture, even in terms of religious beliefs and stuff like that. This is one of the key concepts here. This will come up. I can almost guarantee that there will be a question somewhere, somehow, on the MITA or the MITA rotational labor system. Basically, they drew numbers out of a hat, just like a draft for the military, and they sent people off to go kind of be slave laborers. I mean, they were fed and they were treated well, but the work that you would do in these situations was crazy. In fact, a lot of times when people got drafted into the MITA or MITA labor system for their period of time, whether it was 1 year or 2 years before they were allowed to return home, many said goodbye to their families, and their families and communities threw them huge parties because they knew they weren't going to be coming back. They would have starved, or they would have been exposed to really extreme climates and died of starvation potentially, or died of disease, or died of again extreme exposure to the cold or to the heat or whatever. These are kind of cool. They just kind of show the way that they kept account of both the days, the months, the years, the accounts that they had to settle with what cost what and how many people would go. It's pretty cool looking into that. But then the final piece is really outside of our time period, which is the decline of the Inca. Again, when you stretch along these thousands of miles and you're in the mountains, it's very hard to connect and keep your empire connected. And when the Spanish got there, especially with Pizarro, it didn't take long for him to realize that this land wasn't easy enough for the Inca to move their army around. So not only was disease there, but the Spanish had guns and easily wiped out the Inca. So that's all I have kind of for the keeping of power throughout South America. The Inca were the greatest empire there, but that's all you really need to know about them. So focus on the terrace farming and the MITA labor system and the fact that they use tribute, and you should be good to go.